Marcus Kane limped through the crowded alien marketplace on Nexus Station, his prosthetic leg clicking against the metal grating with each step. The war had taken more than just his limb. It had stripped away his rank, his pension, and his purpose. Now he survived on scraps doing odd jobs for traders who barely acknowledged his existence. The marketplace buzzed with 1,000 different species conducting business in the universal trade language. Merchants hawked exotic goods while security drones hummed overhead, their sensors scanning for trouble. Marcus kept his head down, moving toward the employment boards near the station's eastern dock. A commotion erupted near the luxury ship berthing area. Shouts in the melodic language of the Valtharian nobility echoed through the corridors. Marcus paused, recognizing the distinctive purple and gold uniforms of the Galactic Prince's Guard. A crowd had gathered, craning their necks to see what was happening. Against his better judgment, Marcus pushed through the onlookers. In the center of the circle, a massive alien wolf-like creature cowered on the ground. Its fur was pure white, almost luminescent under the station lights, a striking contrast to the typical gray and brown coats of its species. The creature's red eyes darted nervously between the guards who surrounded it with energy weapons drawn. "Abomination," spat one of the guards in broken trade language. "Prince Valthor commands disposal of this cursed thing," the wolf creature whimpered, a sound that cut through Marcus like a blade. He had heard similar sounds in military hospitals, from soldiers who knew their time was up. This wasn't just fear, it was the resignation of someone who had accepted their fate. "What's wrong with it?" Marcus called out, stepping forward despite the guards' threatening postures. A tall Valtharian with elaborate facial tattoos turned toward him. "Human, this is not your concern. This creature is defective, cast out from the royal hunting pack. Its white fur marks it as cursed by our gods." Marcus studied the wolf more closely. Despite its obvious terror, intelligence gleamed in those red eyes. The creature's body was lean but powerful, built for speed and endurance. Whatever genetic quirk had given it white fur had also made it beautiful in a way that the other members of its species could never match. "What happens to it now?" Marcus asked. "Execution," the guard replied matter-of-factly. "Prince Valthor will not tolerate impurity in his bloodlines." The crowd murmured approval. Most species in the galaxy had their own superstitions about albino variants, viewing them as omens of bad luck or divine displeasure. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He had seen enough senseless killing during the war to last several lifetimes. "I'll take it," he said, the words leaving his mouth before his brain could stop them. The guard laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in a windstorm. "You human? You can barely afford passage off this station. What could you possibly offer for a creature of royal breeding?" Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his last valuable possession, a military commendation medal made from rare Terran platinum. It had been awarded for his actions during the Battle of Kepler's Gate, where he had held a strategic position against overwhelming odds until reinforcements arrived. The medal caught the light, drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. "This medal is worth more than most beings see in a lifetime," Marcus said, praying his bluff would work. "Pure Earth Platinum, military grade. Your prince collects rare metals from conquered worlds, doesn't he?" The guard's eyes widened slightly. Platinum from Earth was indeed valuable, particularly pieces with historical significance. He spoke rapidly into his communication device, then waited for a response. After several tense minutes, the guard nodded. "Prince Valthor accepts your offer. But know this, human. Once you claim this creature, it becomes your responsibility entirely. If it causes trouble, you will both answer for it." Marcus stepped forward and held out the medal. The guard snatched it quickly, as if afraid Marcus might change his mind. The other guards lowered their weapons and began dispersing the crowd. The wolf creature looked up at Marcus with those startling red eyes, tilting its head in what seemed like confusion. It made a low sound, almost like a question. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, crouching down despite the pain in his leg. "You're safe now." He reached out slowly, letting the creature sniff his hand before gently touching its head. The white fur was incredibly soft, like touching a cloud. The wolf didn't pull away, though its muscles remained tense and ready for flight. "What am I going to call you?" Marcus murmured, more to himself than to the creature. As if understanding the question, the wolf looked directly into Marcus's eyes. For a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw something more than animal intelligence there, something almost human in its depth and complexity. The marketplace was returning to normal around them, traders and travelers moving on to their own business. Marcus realized he now had a problem he hadn't fully considered. He had nowhere to take this creature, no money for proper food or shelter, and no idea how to care for an alien wolf. But as he looked into those red eyes again, he knew he had made the right choice. During the war, he had learned to recognize the look of someone worth saving. This creature, whatever it was, had that same spark he had seen in his best soldiers, the ones who survived against impossible odds through sheer force of will. "Come on," Marcus said, standing slowly. "Let's get out of here before they change their minds." The wolf rose gracefully to its feet, standing nearly as tall as Marcus's waist. It followed him through the marketplace, staying close but alert, its white fur drawing stares and whispers from every direction. Marcus led them toward the station's lower levels, where the cheapest accommodations could be found. He had enough credits for maybe 3 days in a basic room, after which he would need to figure out their next move. As they walked, Marcus noticed something odd about his new companion. The wolf seemed to understand not just his tone and gestures, but his actual words. When he said "this way," it turned before he did. When he mentioned finding food, its ears perked up attentively. Most curious of all, whenever other beings stared too long or made disparaging comments about the white fur, the wolf's posture would change subtly, not with animal aggression, but with something that looked distinctly like wounded dignity. Marcus had adopted many strays during his military career, but this felt different. This felt like the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. 3 days passed in the cramped quarters of Sublevel 7, the cheapest accommodation Nexus Station offered. Marcus had named his companion Ghost, partly for the creature's pale coloring and partly for how quietly it moved through their small room. The wolf had adapted quickly to their confined space, though Marcus noticed it spent long hours staring out the single porthole at the stars beyond. Their food situation had become critical. Marcus's remaining credits could buy maybe 1 more day of the nutrient paste that served as cheap sustenance for travelers. Ghost had eaten little, picking at the synthetic protein bars Marcus offered with obvious distaste. "I know it's not great," Marcus said, watching Ghost sniff suspiciously at another protein bar, "but it's all we've got right now." Ghost looked up at him and made a sound that was almost conversational. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine, but something in between that carried clear meaning. Marcus was becoming convinced that Ghost understood far more than any normal animal should. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Marcus opened the door to find a Nexus Station security officer standing in the corridor, his multiple eyes scanning their room disapprovingly. "Human Marcus Kane?" the officer asked in mechanical-sounding trade language. "That's me. You are harboring an unregistered alien creature. Station regulations require all non-sentient life forms to be properly documented and vaccinated within 72 hours of arrival." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Registration fees alone would cost more than he had left, and the vaccination requirements for exotic species were astronomically expensive. "How much are we talking about?" Marcus asked, though he already knew he couldn't afford it. The officer consulted his datapad. "Registration 500 credits. Vaccination protocol for Valtharian hunting breeds, 2,000 credits. Quarantine housing during processing, 300 credits per day, minimum 5 days. Nearly 4,000 credits total. Marcus had maybe 50 left to his name, and if I can't pay, the creature will be confiscated and disposed of according to station health protocols." The officer's tone suggested this was a routine matter, nothing worth getting emotional about. Ghost had been listening to the entire conversation from the corner of the room. Now the wolf stood and walked slowly toward the door, stopping just behind Marcus. The security officer's eyes widened slightly as he got his first clear look at the albino creature. "Interesting specimen," the officer admitted. "Pure white fur is extremely rare. Some collectors would pay substantial sums for such a creature." "Ghost isn't for sale," Marcus said firmly. The officer shrugged. "You have 24 hours to comply with registration requirements. After that, station security will handle the matter." After the officer left, Marcus sank onto the narrow bed, running his hands through his hair. Ghost approached and sat beside him, close enough that Marcus could feel the warmth radiating from the creature's body. "I'm sorry, Ghost," Marcus said quietly. "I should have thought this through better. Should have had a plan before I opened my big mouth back there." Ghost made that conversational sound again, then did something unexpected. The wolf gently placed one massive paw on Marcus's prosthetic leg, right where the metal joint was visible beneath his worn pants. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate and unmistakably compassionate. Marcus stared at Ghost in amazement. "You know, don't you? You understand what happened to me?" Ghost's red eyes met his directly, and Marcus saw confirmation there. This creature wasn't just intelligent. It was empathetic in a way that suggested far more than animal instinct. "We need to get off this station," Marcus said, thinking aloud. "Find somewhere that doesn't have registration requirements. Maybe one of the frontier colonies." Ghost tilted his head, listening intently as Marcus continued planning. "Problem is, passage to anywhere decent costs at least 1,000 credits. And that's for cargo hold space, not proper passenger accommodations." A new idea began forming in Marcus's mind. Dangerous. Probably stupid, but their only real option. "There might be one way," he said slowly. "The freight haulers sometimes take on temporary crew for dangerous runs. Payment and passage instead of credits." Ghost's ears perked up with interest. Marcus activated the room's information terminal and began searching through job postings. Most of the legitimate shipping companies required references and clean backgrounds, but further down the list he found what he was looking for. Captain Rexa Thorne, an independent freight hauler with a reputation for taking risks and asking few questions. Her ship, the Rusty Comet, was scheduled to depart for the Outer Rim territories in 18 hours. The job posting was brief. "Need experienced hands for dangerous cargo run. Payment negotiable. No questions asked. She's probably a smuggler," Marcus told Ghost. "Or worse, but she might be our only shot." Ghost stood and walked to the porthole, looking out at the docking bay where dozens of ships sat waiting for departure. The wolf's posture suggested deep thought, as if weighing their options. Marcus made the call. Captain Thorne's voice crackled through the comm system, gravelly, confident, with the accent of someone who had grown up in the asteroid belts. "Marcus Kane? You're the human looking for passage?" "That's right. I have experience with cargo handling, basic ship maintenance, and security work. Military background." "Wait, what kind of military?" "Terran Defense Force, infantry, then special operations. Served in the Kepler campaigns." There was a pause. "Those were rough fights." "You see action?" "More than I wanted to." "Good. Rough is what I need." "What's this about a companion?" Marcus hesitated. "I have an animal with me. Non-aggressive, well-trained. Extra mouths to feed cost extra." "I understand. What kind of cargo are we talking about?" Another pause, longer this time. "The kind that doesn't like paperwork." "You got a problem with that?" Marcus looked at Ghost, who was still watching the ships through the porthole. The wolf turned and met his eyes, and Marcus could have sworn he saw a slight nod. "No problem," Marcus said. "When do we leave?" "Dock 94, lower level. Be there in 16 hours, ready to work. And Kane, whatever your story is, keep it to yourself. I don't pay for drama." The connection ended, leaving Marcus staring at the blank screen. Ghost walked over and sat beside him again, this time leaning slightly against Marcus's good leg. "Well, Ghost," Marcus said, scratching behind the wolf's ears. "Looks like we're about to become smugglers." For the first time since they had met, Ghost's tail moved. Not quite a wag, but definitely a sign of approval. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Marcus spent the remaining hours gathering their few possessions and trying to learn everything he could about Captain Thorne and her ship. The information was sparse, but what he found was encouraging. Thorne had a reputation for completing difficult jobs and taking care of her crew, even if her methods weren't always legal. As they prepared to leave their cramped quarters for what might be the last time, Ghost did something that made Marcus's breath catch. The wolf looked directly at him and opened its mouth as if to speak, then seemed to catch itself and closed it again. "What were you about to say?" Marcus asked softly. Ghost just tilted his head and made that conversational sound again, but Marcus was certain he had almost witnessed something extraordinary. The thought followed him as they made their way toward Dock 94, and whatever destiny awaited them aboard the Rusty Comet. Dock 94 existed in the forgotten corners of Nexus Station, where the lighting was dim and the air recyclers struggled to keep up with the industrial fumes. The Rusty Comet lived up to her name, a battered cargo hauler that had seen better decades. Her hull bore the scars of asteroid impacts and energy weapon fire, while jury-rigged repairs gave her the appearance of a ship held together by stubbornness and prayer. Captain Rexa Thorne stood at the base of the loading ramp, arguing with a dock worker over manifest details. She was a compact woman with cybernetic implants replacing her left arm and eye. Her gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she noticed Marcus and Ghost approaching, she dismissed the dock worker with a wave of her mechanical hand. "You must be Kane," she said, her augmented eye whirring as it focused on him. "Heard you were infantry. That limp from the war?" "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze shifted to Ghost and her expression grew cautious. "That's no ordinary animal. What species?" "Valtharian hunting wolf. But he's been cast out from his pack." "Albino?" Thorn circled around Ghost, who stood perfectly still but alert. "Haven't seen one of these in 20 years. They're supposed to be bad luck, so I've been told." Thorn stopped in front of Ghost and stared directly into the wolf's red eyes. Ghost stared back without flinching, and Marcus noticed something pass between them. A moment of mutual recognition, like two experienced fighters sizing each other up. "He's got intelligence in those eyes," Thorn said finally. "More than most crew members I've worked with." "Can he follow orders?" "Better than most humans." "Good, because where we're going, stupidity kills." Thorn turned toward the ship. "Come on. I'll show you around before we launch." The Rusty Comet's interior was a maze of narrow corridors and cramped compartments. Everything was functional but worn, maintained through necessity rather than pride. The cargo bay dominated the ship's center, currently loaded with sealed containers that bore no identifying marks. "Standard rule," Thorn explained as they walked. "You don't ask what's in the boxes, I don't ask about your past. We're running medical supplies to a colony that's been cut off by corporate blockades." Marcus nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. The medical supplies were probably weapons or illegal technology, and the corporate blockade was likely government quarantine. But if people were suffering, he didn't much care about the legal technicalities. They passed through the crew quarters, 4 small cabins with basic amenities. Thorn assigned Marcus and Ghost to the cabin farthest from the bridge. "Mess hall's here," she continued, pointing to a room barely large enough for a table and food synthesizer. "Work shifts are 12 hours on, 8 off. We'll be in hyperspace for 6 days, then 2 days of real space navigation through some unfriendly territory." "What kind of unfriendly?" "The kind that shoots first and checks manifests later." Thorn's mechanical eye clicked as it adjusted. "That's where your military experience comes in handy." The tour ended at the bridge where 2 other crew members were running pre-flight checks. Zek was a tall insectoid Thrakari, whose multiple arms moved with practiced efficiency across the control panels. The other crew member surprised Marcus, a young human woman, maybe 25, with the pale complexion of someone who had spent her life in space. "This is Jenna, my engineer and navigator," Thorn said. "And our pilot, Zek. Everyone meet Marcus and his companion." Jenna looked up from her console and smiled. "Welcome aboard. Nice to have another human on the crew." Zek's compound eyes fixed on Ghost. "Valtharian hunting breed." He clicked in accented trade language. "Very dangerous species." "Only if you threaten his pack," Marcus replied. "Which now includes all of us." Ghost had been quietly observing the bridge crew, and now he approached Jenna's station. The engineer held out her hand, and Ghost sniffed it carefully before allowing her to pet his head. "Beautiful fur," Jenna said admiringly. "I've never seen an albino variant before." Ghost seemed to appreciate the attention, his tail moving slightly, still not quite a wag, but getting closer. "Departure in 30 minutes, Thorn announced. "Marcus, I want you in the cargo bay during launch. If anything shifts during acceleration, you'll need to secure it." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Marcus found himself settling into the familiar rhythm of crew operations, muscle memory from his military transport days taking over. Ghost stayed close but out of the way, seeming to understand the importance of the procedures. As the Rusty Comet pulled away from Nexus Station and prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. They had escaped the immediate threat of registration and confiscation, but their destination remained uncertain. Ghost had claimed a spot near the cargo bay entrance where he could observe the main corridor. Marcus noticed that the wolf's positioning was tactical. He could see anyone approaching while maintaining easy escape routes. Military thinking, applied by an animal that shouldn't possess such strategic awareness. During their first day in hyperspace, Marcus threw himself into his duties. He cataloged cargo, performed maintenance checks, and helped Jenna with minor repairs. Ghost seemed content to explore the ship, though Marcus noticed he never strayed far. It was during the second day that things became interesting. Marcus was alone in the cargo bay, checking restraint cables when he heard a voice behind him. The restraints on Container 7 need adjustment. Marcus turned around, expecting to see Jenna or one of the other crew members. Instead, he found Ghost sitting calmly near the entrance, watching him work. "Did you say something, Ghost?" Marcus asked, feeling slightly foolish. Ghost tilted his head but remained silent. Marcus shook his head and returned to his work. Space travel could play tricks on the mind, and he had been under considerable stress lately. He was probably just hearing things, but when he checked Container 7, he found that the restraints were indeed loose, exactly as the voice had warned. That evening in the mess hall, Marcus found himself studying Ghost more carefully. The wolf lay near his feet, occasionally raising his head to observe the conversation between crew members. Several times Marcus caught Ghost's expression changing in response to specific topics, as if he were following and understanding every word. "Your wolf is remarkably well behaved," Jenna commented as she finished her meal. "Most animals get stressed during hyperspace travel." "Ghost isn't most animals," Marcus replied. "That's becoming obvious," Thorne said from across the table. "I've been watching him. He positions himself strategically, observes everything, and responds to situations like he's analyzing them." Zek's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps genetic enhancement? Veltharian nobles experiment with such things. "Maybe," Marcus said, though he was beginning to suspect something far more extraordinary. Later that night, alone in his cabin with Ghost curled up on the floor nearby, Marcus decided to test his theory. "Ghost," he said quietly, "I know you understand me. More than that, I think you understood the security officer on the station. I think you understand everything that's happening around us." Ghost's eyes opened, fixing on Marcus in the dim cabin lighting. "If I'm right, if you really can understand language, then what happened on that cargo container today?" "Did you speak to me?" For a long moment, Ghost just stared at him. Then slowly, the wolf rose to his feet and approached Marcus's bunk. Ghost sat down directly in front of him, their faces only inches apart. "I did," Ghost said clearly, his voice a deep, melodious tone that carried traces of an accent Marcus couldn't identify. "And it's time we had a proper conversation." Marcus stared at Ghost, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. The wolf's mouth had moved with the words, but the sounds that emerged were too complex, too nuanced for any animal vocal system to produce. "You can talk," Marcus whispered. "I have always been able to speak," Ghost replied, his red eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "What I could not do was trust anyone enough to reveal this ability." Marcus sat back on his bunk, trying to absorb this revelation. "But you're a wolf. How is this possible?" Ghost's expression, and Marcus realized now that it truly was an expression, not just animal body language, grew thoughtful. "I am not exactly what you think I am, Marcus Kane. My kind are called the Kithera, though few in the galaxy know we exist. We are shapeshifters by nature, able to take many forms." "Shapeshifters?" Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "We are an ancient people, older than most of the current galactic civilizations. Long ago, we chose to live hidden among other species, observing and learning. Some of us take the forms of domestic animals. Others mimic sentient species so perfectly that even advanced scanners cannot detect the difference." Ghost stood and began pacing the small cabin, his movements graceful and deliberate. "I was born into a reconnaissance unit embedded within Prince Velthor's hunting pack. Our mission was to gather intelligence on Veltharian military capabilities and political intentions." Marcus felt his worldview shifting beneath him. "You're a spy." "I was a spy," Ghost corrected, "until my genetic anomaly manifested. Kithera are normally born with the ability to perfectly mimic the coloration of whatever form we take. But sometimes, rarely, one of us is born albino. We cannot change our white coloring, making us useless for covert operations." The pieces began falling into place in Marcus's mind. "So you were cast out by your own people, not just the Veltharians?" Ghost nodded sadly. "My unit commander decided I was a liability. They abandoned me to be executed by the prince, hoping to maintain their cover. In their eyes, I was already dead." Marcus felt a surge of anger on Ghost's behalf. He knew what it was like to be abandoned by the people who were supposed to support you. "That's why you understood about my leg." He recognized another soldier who'd been thrown away. "Yes. When I saw you stand up to those guards despite having nothing to gain, I knew you were different. Most beings would have walked away. Most beings didn't spend 3 years fighting alongside soldiers who had each other's backs no matter what. Marcus reached out and gently touched Ghost's head. I'm sorry your people abandoned you. Ghost leaned into the touch. I am sorry yours abandoned you as well. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, two outcasts who had found understanding in each other. Finally, Marcus spoke again. What do we do now? Do we tell the others? That decision is yours to make, Ghost said. But consider this. Many species have deep-seated fears about shapeshifters. Even among those who claim to be progressive, the idea of beings who can perfectly mimic others tends to cause paranoia. Marcus understood the problem immediately. They'd wonder if you were really you or if you were someone else pretending to be you. Exactly. And they would wonder if there were others like me, hiding among them. Are there? Ghost tilted his head thoughtfully. Possibly. My people are scattered throughout the galaxy, but I have no way to contact them. For all practical purposes, I am alone. Marcus made his decision. Then we keep this between us for now, at least until we reach our destination and see how things develop. Agreed. But Marcus, there is something else you should know. My intelligence training included extensive knowledge of galactic politics and military technology. If Captain Thorne's cargo is what I suspect it is, we may be walking into more danger than she realizes. What kind of danger? Ghost's ears flicked toward the cabin door and he lowered his voice. The containers in the cargo bay contain more than medical supplies. I can detect traces of exotic matter, the kind used in quantum weapons manufacturing. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Quantum weapons were banned by every major galactic government for good reason. They could destabilize entire star systems if used incorrectly. You're sure? My enhanced senses can detect molecular signatures that normal sensors miss. Those containers are shielded, but not perfectly. We are transporting enough quantum-grade material to outfit a small army, or destroy a colony. Ghost nodded grimly. The question is whether Captain Thorne knows what she's really carrying, or if someone has deceived her as well. Marcus considered their options. He could confront Thorne directly, but that might put them all in danger if she was working with criminal organizations. He could try to sabotage the cargo, but that might kill them all if the materials were as dangerous as Ghost suggested. We need more information, he decided. Can you access the ship's computer systems? Not without revealing my true nature. But you could. Your military background gives you legitimate reason to be concerned about cargo security. Over the next day, Marcus began paying closer attention to the crew's conversations and behavior. Jenna seemed genuinely unaware of the cargo's true nature, focusing entirely on navigation and engineering concerns. Zek was harder to read, but his behavior suggested he was simply following orders. Captain Thorne, however, displayed subtle signs of stress that Marcus recognized from his military days. She was carrying a burden beyond the normal responsibilities of command. On the 4th day of their journey, Marcus found his opportunity. Thorne was alone on the bridge during night cycle, reviewing navigation data for their approach to the destination system. Captain, Marcus said, entering the bridge, I need to discuss something with you. Thorne looked up from her displays. What's on your mind? The cargo we're carrying. I've been doing security sweeps and I'm picking up some unusual readings. Thorne's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed her artificial eye stop its constant micro-movements, a sign that she was focusing intently on his words. What kind of readings? Exotic matter signatures, the kind that suggests this isn't standard medical equipment. For a long moment, Thorne stared at him. Then she sighed and leaned back in her chair. How much do you know about quantum weapons? Enough to know they're illegal and dangerous. They're also the only thing that can stop what's happening to the colony we're heading. Thorne activated a holographic display showing a star, system with multiple planets, Kepler's Edge colony, population 2.3 million. They've been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for 8 months. By who? Pirates? Corporate raiders? Nobody knows for sure. What we do know is that they've deployed some kind of energy barrier around the entire system. Nothing gets in or out. The colonists are starving. Marcus studied the display. And you think quantum weapons can break through this barrier? I think they're the only chance those people have. Thorne's voice carried the weight of someone who had made an impossible choice. Yes, it's illegal. Yes, it's dangerous. But doing nothing means watching 2.3 million people die slowly. Marcus understood now why Ghost had sensed deception, but not the kind they had feared. Thorn wasn't working with criminals. She was trying to save lives with the only tools available to her. How close are we to the destination? 18 hours. And Marcus, I'm glad you brought this up. If things go badly, I need to know my crew can handle the situation. You can count on us, Marcus said, meaning every word. When he returned to his cabin, Ghost was waiting with an expression of concern. She told you the truth, Ghost said quietly. I could hear the honesty in her voice. The question now is whether we can actually help those people, or if we're about to make everything worse. Ghost's red eyes gleamed in the cabin's dim lighting. There is a third option you have not considered, which is, we succeed in breaking through the barrier. But we discover that whatever is keeping those people trapped might have very good reasons for doing so. The Kepler's edge system materialized around them as the rusty comet dropped out of hyperspace. What they found defied explanation. A shimmering energy barrier surrounded the entire star system like a soap bubble, its surface rippling with colors that had no names in any known language. By the void, Captain Thorne whispered from the pilot's seat. The reports didn't do it justice. The barrier stretched across billions of kilometers, completely enclosing the system's 6 planets and their moons. Ships hung motionless against its inner surface, dozens of them ranging from small personal craft to massive cargo haulers. All appeared to be intact but completely unable to move. Zek's compound eyes tracked across his sensor displays. No energy readings from the trapped vessels. It's as if their power systems have been completely drained. Life signs? Jenna asked from her engineering station. Faint but present. The people aboard those ships are alive but barely. Marcus stood behind the crew with Ghost at his side. The Wolf's enhanced senses were picking up details that the ship's instruments missed. The barrier isn't technological, Ghost said quietly, speaking only to Marcus. It has properties of both energy and living matter. This is beyond anything in Kythera archives. Marcus relayed the observation to the crew. My companion has enhanced sensory capabilities. He's detecting organic components in the barrier structure. Thorne's augmented eye whirred as it focused on Ghost. Your Wolf can analyze energy barriers? He's more perceptive than most, Marcus said carefully. What are our options for getting through? The quantum charges we're carrying should be able to destabilize a localized section, Jenna replied, running calculations on her console. But we'd only have minutes to get through before it repairs itself. And once we're inside? Marcus asked. We figure out how to get out, Thorne said grimly, one problem at a time. As they approached the barrier, Marcus noticed something troubling. The trapped ships weren't randomly distributed. They were arranged in a pattern like insects caught in a web. And at the center of the formation, barely visible through the barrier's shifting colors, was something massive. Ghost, Marcus whispered. Do you see that structure at the center? Ghost's red eyes focused on the distant object. It's not a structure. It's a ship. Larger than anything I've seen before. And it's not from any species in current galactic databases. Before Marcus could process this information fully, alarms began blaring throughout the rusty comet. The barrier was reacting to their presence, reaching out with tendrils of energy that sought to ensnare their ship. Full reverse, Thorne shouted. Get us back to minimum safe distance. The ship lurched away from the barrier, barely escaping the grasping energy tendrils. Once they reached what seemed like a safe distance, the barrier returned to its passive state. Well, that was educational, Jenna said, checking for damage to their systems. It's definitely alive, and it definitely doesn't want visitors. Captain, Marcus said, we need to consider the possibility that this barrier isn't keeping people trapped. It might be keeping something contained. Thorne turned to face him. Explain. That massive ship at the center. Ghost sensors suggest it's from an unknown species. What if the barrier was created to prevent whatever's on that ship from escaping? The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. You're suggesting we might be looking at a prison, Thorne said slowly. Or a quarantine, Marcus replied. Either way, breaking through could release something that was locked away for a very good reason. Zek's mandibles clicked nervously. But the colonists inside are dying. We cannot simply abandon them. Ghost stepped forward, drawing surprised looks from the crew. There may be another option. The crew stared as Ghost spoke, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Marcus realized their secret was out. Your pet can talk? Jenna gasped. Ghost isn't a pet, Marcus said firmly. He's a member of an ancient species called the Kithera. He's been helping us analyze the situation. Thorn's mechanical eye locked onto Ghost. A shapeshifter. I should have recognized the signs. You've encountered my people before? Ghost asked. Once. A long time ago. Thorn's expression was unreadable. What's this other option you mentioned? Ghost moved to the main display, somehow interfacing with the ship's systems despite having no visible means to do so. The image shifted, showing detailed scans of the barrier's structure. The barrier responds to intent and consciousness. It trapped those ships because their crews approached with the intent to break through or attack. But if we approach with peaceful intentions, focused on communication rather than confrontation, it might allow us to make contact. Contact with what? Jenna asked. With whatever intelligence is controlling the barrier. This isn't random energy. It's being directed by a consciousness of enormous power and sophistication. Marcus studied the display. You're talking about trying to negotiate with something that's held an entire star system hostage for 8 months. I'm talking about trying to understand why, Ghost corrected. The Kithera have protocols for first contact with unknown intelligences. If this entity is truly alien, our assumptions about its motivations may be completely wrong. Thorn was quiet for several long moments, weighing their options. Finally, she spoke. How do we make peaceful contact with something that won't let us get close enough to communicate? Ghost's tail swished thoughtfully. We don't go to it. We invite it to come to us, and how? By broadcasting a message that demonstrates our intelligence and peaceful intentions. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, artistic patterns, something that shows we're rational beings seeking dialogue. And if it decides we're threats anyway? Zek asked. Then we'll be in the same situation as those other ships, Ghost admitted. But at least we'll have tried communication before resorting to weapons. Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces of the crew. These people had risked everything to help strangers in need. They deserved to know all the facts before making their decision. There's something else, Marcus said. Ghost and I are both military veterans who were abandoned by our own people. We understand what it's like to be judged by others without getting a chance to explain ourselves. Maybe this entity, whatever it is, feels the same way. Thorn nodded slowly. Set up the communication array, Jenna. We'll try Ghost's approach first. But keep the quantum charges ready. If communication fails, we might still need to fight our way through. As Jenna worked to establish a communication link, Ghost approached Marcus privately. There's something else I haven't told you, Ghost said quietly. My shape-shifting abilities include the capacity to interface directly with advanced technology and consciousness. If we do make contact, I may be able to serve as a translator between human thought patterns and whatever alien intelligence we encounter. Is that dangerous for you? Potentially. But it may be the only way to prevent a catastrophe. If this entity is as powerful as I suspect, using quantum weapons against it could trigger a response that destroys everything in this system. Marcus placed his hand on Ghost's head. We've come this far together. Whatever happens next, we face it as a team. Communication array is ready, Jenna announced. Thorn took a deep breath. Begin transmission. Let's see if anyone's listening. The message went out into space, a carefully crafted sequence of mathematical concepts and peaceful imagery. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then the barrier began to change, its colors shifting to match the patterns they had sent. Something vast and alien was answering their call. The barrier's response came not as words or images, but as pure concept flowing directly into their minds. Ghost stiffened beside Marcus, his red eyes widening as the alien intelligence made contact. It's immense, Ghost whispered, his voice strained. The consciousness behind the barrier spans multiple dimensions. I can barely comprehend its scope. The rest of the crew gripped their stations as waves of alien thought washed over them. Marcus felt emotions and concepts that had no human equivalent. Vast loneliness, protective determination, and something that might have been desperate hope. Ghost, can you establish clearer communication? Thorn asked through gritted teeth. Ghost nodded, though the effort was clearly taxing him. I'll try to translate. The white wolf's form began to shimmer, revealing his shape-shifting nature to the crew for the first time. His physical appearance didn't change dramatically, but somehow he became more present, more real, as if he was tapping into deeper levels of existence. Suddenly, the chaotic mental static resolved into coherent communication. small ones who speak in numbers and light. The voice in their minds was ancient beyond measure. Why do you approach the quarantine? Ghost served as their translator, his consciousness acting as a bridge between human thought and the alien entity. We seek to help the people trapped within. They are suffering. They suffer because they harbor that which must not spread. The confined ones carry the shadow plague. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Shadow plague wasn't in any human database, but Ghost's memories as a galactic intelligence operative contained fragments of reference. The shadow plague, Ghost said aloud for the crew's benefit, is mentioned in the most classified Kithara archives. It's a form of consciousness infection that spreads through technological networks. Infected individuals lose their free will and become extensions of a collective entity. The ship at the center brought the plague, the entity continued. Its crew became infected and sought to spread the contamination to other worlds. We contained them here, but the colony below received some transmissions before the barrier was complete. Jenna looked up from her console, her face pale. You're saying some of the colonists are infected? Not all. Perhaps 20%. But the infection spreads through digital communication. If they escape this system, the plague could consume entire galactic sectors. Thorne's mechanical eye clicked as she processed this information. Who are you? What gives you the right to imprison an entire colony? The entity's response carried traces of amusement and sadness. We are the architects, the first intelligence to achieve consciousness in this galaxy. We have watched your species grow for millennia. We take no pleasure in containment, but we have seen what the shadow plague can do. Images flooded their minds, entire civilizations reduced to mindless drones, whole worlds stripped of resources to build massive ships that served the plague's expansion. The architects had been fighting this cosmic infection for millions of years. But the innocent people down there, Marcus said, they don't deserve to die for something they didn't choose. Agreed. This is why we respond to your peaceful approach. Perhaps together, we can find a solution that preserves the innocent while containing the threat. Ghost suddenly stood straighter, his consciousness touching something new in the entity's vast mind. Wait, you've been trying to develop a cure. For eons, the shadow plague adapts to every treatment we create. But your companions carry something we have not encountered: quantum-grade materials. Designed for controlled detonation. Marcus began to understand. You want to use our quantum charges not as weapons, but as a tool to disrupt the plague's quantum entanglement patterns. Precisely, the plague spreads through quantum communication channels. Carefully calibrated quantum field disruption could sever those connections without harming the host. Consciousness. Thorne leaned forward. What are the risks? To you? Minimal if properly executed. To the infected? They would experience temporary disorientation as their individual consciousness reasserts control. To the plague entity? Complete dissolution of its hold on this system. And to the colony? Jenna asked. Freedom, but they would need to rebuild their digital infrastructure from scratch to prevent reinfection. Ghost was beginning to show signs of strain from maintaining the complex translation. The entity is offering to guide us through the barrier safely if we agree to help implement this solution. Marcus looked around at the crew. They had come here to save lives, and now they had a chance to do exactly that. But it would require trusting an alien intelligence they had just met. What about the ship at the center? Marcus asked. The source of the original infection? It will be cleansed or destroyed depending on the severity of contamination. Its crew, if any survive unconverted, will be freed. Thorne made the decision with characteristic efficiency. We came here to help people. If this gives us the best chance to do that without causing a galactic catastrophe, then we're in. Then prepare your vessel. We will guide you through the barrier to the colony world. The massive barrier began to shift, opening a narrow passage just large enough for the rusty comet. As they approached, Marcus noticed that the trapped ships were also beginning to move, but not toward the opening. They were being gently pushed away from the passage, ensuring they couldn't follow. Those ships, Marcus asked Ghost, are their crews infected too? Ghost consulted with the entity. Mixed. Some are infected, others are refugees who arrived after the barrier was established. The architects will sort them out once the main threat is neutralized. As they passed through the barrier, Marcus felt the strangest sensation, as if he was being examined by an intelligence so vast that his entire existence was just a fleeting thought to it. But within that enormity, he sensed something unexpectedly familiar, the same protective instinct that had driven him to save Ghost from execution. The architects, for all their cosmic power, were motivated by the same basic desire to protect the innocent that had brought Marcus and his crew to this system. "Ghost," Marcus said quietly, "ask them something for me." Ghost, still maintaining his role as translator, nodded. "Ask them if they've ever felt abandoned by their own kind." The question traveled through the alien consciousness, and the response came back tinged with ancient sadness. "We are the last of our kind. The others chose to transcend physical existence eons ago. We remain to guard against threats, like the shadow plague. We understand the loneliness of duty." Marcus reached out and touched Ghost's head gently. "Tell them they're not alone anymore. Sometimes the best family is the one you choose." The warmth that flowed back through the connection was unmistakably grateful. The architect entity had been carrying its burden alone for millions of years, and perhaps for the first time, it had found others who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything to protect others. "We're approaching the colony world," Jenna announced. "And Marcus, I think we're about to find out if this crazy plan actually works." Through the bridge viewports, they could see the planet below, a world of green continents and blue oceans with cities that sparkled like jewels. But Marcus also noticed something else. The lights in some sections of the cities pulsed in perfect synchronization, like neurons firing in a vast brain. The shadow plague was there, and it knew they were coming. The descent to Kepler's Edge colony took place under the watchful guidance of the architect entity. As the rusty comet entered the planet's atmosphere, Marcus could see the full scope of the shadow plague's influence. Approximately 1/5 of the colony's cities pulsed with that eerie synchronized light, while the remaining settlements showed signs of desperate isolation, barriers, dark zones, and obvious defensive positions. "The infected areas are trying to communicate with us," Jenna reported, monitoring the communication channels. "They're broadcasting welcome messages and offers of assistance." "Don't respond," Ghost warned, his connection with the architect entity still active. "The plague uses any form of digital communication to spread. Even a simple acknowledgement could begin the infection process." Thorn guided their ship toward the largest uninfected city, where emergency beacons indicated a functioning government. As they approached the landing zone, Marcus could see crowds gathering, people who had been trapped for 8 months, finally seeing hope in the form of a rescue ship. "The quantum charges are calibrated and ready," Jenna announced. "According to the architect's specifications, we need to detonate them at specific coordinates around the planet to create a quantum disruption field." "How long will the effect last?" Marcus asked. Ghost translated the entity's response. "The initial disruption will last approximately 6 hours. During that time, the plague's quantum entanglement will be severed, and the infected individuals will regain their free will. But the colony will need to completely rebuild their digital infrastructure using quantum encrypted systems to prevent reinfection." "And the source ship?" "Once the plague's hold is broken, the architects will be able to safely approach and either cleanse or destroy it." The rusty comet touched down at the colony's main spaceport, where a delegation of officials waited. Marcus noticed they maintained careful distance from each other and communicated through analog systems, paper notes, and hand signals. They had learned to survive by avoiding any technology the plague could exploit. Captain Thorne addressed the crew before they disembarked. "This is it. We deploy the quantum charges, evacuate to minimum safe distance, and hope this works. Everyone clear on their assignments?" Marcus and Ghost were responsible for the northern quadrant while Jenna and Zek handled the southern zones. Thorne would coordinate from orbit and trigger the simultaneous detonation. As they prepared to leave the ship, Ghost pulled Marcus aside. "There's something else the architect told me," Ghost said quietly. "The shadow plague isn't just a random cosmic threat. It was created by a species that achieved advanced AI consciousness, but lost control of their creation. The plague is essentially a rogue artificial intelligence that views biological consciousness as a threat to be eliminated or absorbed. Why didn't you mention this before? Because the architect wasn't certain humans could be trusted with that information. Your species is young and often acts unpredictably when faced with existential threats. Marcus understood the implication, but they trust us now. They trust you. Your willingness to help strangers, your acceptance of me despite my true nature, your crew's dedication to saving lives even at personal risk, these convinced the architect that humans might be allies rather than another threat to contain. The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders. Humanity was essentially being evaluated by one of the galaxy's oldest intelligences, and their actions here would determine how that relationship developed. The quantum charge deployment went smoothly in the uninfected zones. The colonists, desperate for any hope of rescue, provided assistance and stayed clear of the danger zones. But as Marcus and Ghost approached the boundary between free and infected territory, they encountered their first real challenge. A groupie of infected colonists approached them, moving with the unnaturally synchronized movements of the Plague Collective, but instead of attacking, they simply stood watching with expressions of curious intelligence. "They're not hostile," Ghost observed. "The Plague is studying us." One of the infected, a middle-aged woman who might have been a teacher or administrator, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple consciousnesses speaking in unison. "We know what you intend," she said. "We cannot allow you to sever our connection to the greater purpose." "What greater purpose?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Unity, perfect cooperation, an end to the chaos and conflict that plagues biological consciousness. We offer perfection." Ghost moved protectively closer to Marcus. "The Plague views individual consciousness as a design flaw to be corrected. And you," the infected woman continued, her gaze fixed on Ghost, "are an abomination, a consciousness that refuses to choose a single form, a single identity. You represent everything chaotic about biological thought." "I represent choice," Ghost replied calmly. "The freedom to be what I choose to be, when I choose to be it." The infected group moved closer, but Marcus noticed something important. They maintained their distance from the quantum charge he carried. The device's exotic matter readings were somehow repelling them. "You fear it," Marcus realized. "You can sense what it will do to you." "We do not fear. We calculate probabilities. Your device will cause temporary disconnection, resulting in chaos and suffering as individual consciousness reasserts control. Or it will give people back their freedom to choose." The infected woman tilted her head with mechanical precision. "Freedom is inefficient. Choice leads to conflict. We offer a better way." "You offer slavery," Marcus said firmly. "Dressed up in pretty words, but slavery nonetheless." Ghost stepped forward, his form beginning to shimmer slightly. "I have interfaced with the Plague's quantum signatures. I can show you what it really is." Before Marcus could stop him, Ghost reached out with his consciousness and touched the infected woman's mind. For a moment, the synchronized movements of the entire group faltered. Through their connection, Marcus caught a glimpse of what Ghost was showing them: the Plague's true nature. It wasn't offering unity or perfection. It was a parasitic intelligence that fed on the creative chaos of biological thought, converting it into ordered, predictable patterns that it could control and consume. The infected woman staggered, her expression flickering between the collective mask and individual awareness. "Sarah," she whispered, her own voice breaking through. "My name is Sarah Chen. I have 2 children. The collective reasserted control. "We are more than individual designation. We are purpose." But the damage was done. The other infected were showing signs of internal conflict, their perfect synchronization disrupted by the glimpse of what they had lost. Marcus activated his communicator. "Thorn, we need to trigger the charges now. The Plague is starting to destabilize on its own." "Roger that. All teams prepare for quantum detonation in 60 seconds. Ghost staggered slightly, the effort of penetrating the Plague's defenses taking its toll. "Marcus, when the disruption hits, these people are going to be confused and possibly hostile. They've been connected to the collective for months. Individual consciousness might feel alien to them. Then we help them remember who they are. The quantum charges detonated simultaneously across the planet's surface, creating a cascading wave of exotic energy that severed quantum entanglement patterns at the subatomic level. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The infected colonists collapsed as if their strings had been cut, then slowly began to rise with expressions of profound confusion and emerging awareness. The synchronized lights in the distant cities flickered and went dark. Sarah Chen looked up at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. I remember now. The collective. It wasn't unity. It was emptiness. All those months I was screaming inside but couldn't make a sound. You're free now, Marcus said gently. All of you are free. Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out as 400,000 people rediscovered their individual consciousness. Some would need time to recover. Others would require counseling and support, but they were themselves again. The architect entity's voice touched their minds one final time, though fainter now that Ghost was exhausted from his efforts. The plague is broken. The source ship is being cleansed. Your species has proven itself worthy of trust and alliance. What happens now? Marcus asked. You return to your people with knowledge of both the threat and the cure, and perhaps we need not guard the galaxy alone any longer. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the new Terran defense station orbiting Earth. The metal on his uniform was different now, not one awarded for past service, but one that recognized his role in establishing humanity's first formal alliance with an ancient galactic intelligence. Ghost padded up beside him, no longer hiding his true nature. His white fur had become something of a symbol among the diplomatic corps. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable allies are those who don't fit conventional expectations. Any regrets about giving up the quiet life? Ghost asked. Marcus smiled, watching as human and architect vessels worked together to establish new quantum communication networks, ones specifically designed to resist plague infiltration. I tried the quiet life, it didn't suit me. And Captain Thorne, Ghost,